you so much for taking time to attend this session, and hopefully I'm going to be able to impart a small bit of knowledge to you all today around the topic of DevOps. So yes, I work for GearSet, but I'm not going to be talking specifically about GearSet, more about introducing DevOps as a topic and sharing a little bit more about it, what it consists of, and hopefully give you a little bit of a picture. If you want to go and learn more by the end of the talk, then I've inspired you to do so. So let me go ahead and share my screen because any good presentation has slides, right? So let's do that. Cool. Can people see my screen? Get a wave or a thumbs up. Yes, Alicia's giving me a thumbs up, so that is good. So so welcome to the session, Demystifying DevOps. I want to thank Alicia for inviting me once again to the Maryland Women in Tech group. It's awesome to be here. I also love children, so yes, I have 2 kids of my own, and any kind of childlike interruption is also fine. I am totally used to that. Fortunately, it's 9:30 p.m. here in the UK where I'm based, so hopefully mine don't interrupt me, as it is my night with them. But if I have a small 2-year-old running into my room, then please forgive me. So demystifying DevOps. I'm Jack McCurdy. I am DevOps advocate at GearSet. So I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 4 years now, and over that time I have worked with a range of companies, consultancies, small Salesforce users to large enterprise organizations, and helping them understand what they're looking for from their Salesforce delivery team, and helping them implement processes that help them deliver better quality features to their end users faster, and helping them assess and analyze the space that they're in, and helping them make decisions that are going to make the everyday Salesforce admin, developer, architect, consultant's lives a little bit easier. So I've been in this space for 4 years, and DevOps has been my pure focus for that whole time. And it's been great to speak to a whole bunch of different people in the community about their experiences and what it is, the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis are when it comes to Salesforce delivery. And that's kind of what I specialized in since coming into this ecosystem, and I've been very grateful to speak to a wide range of people at conferences and in groups like this. So there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this presentation. So we're going to take about 20 minutes or so, 20, 25 minutes of me talking to you, talking at you a little bit. I know I like to do things quite interactive. If you ever see me at an event actually speaking, then you realize it's a little bit more interactive than what it might be over Zoom. But if you have any questions, do the whole Zoom, you can raise your hand thing or anything like that. Then we can stop the presentation in the meantime. But that's what I spent the last 4 years doing, is helping Salesforce teams analyze and improve their DevOps processes by working at GearSet. Speaking of GearSet, this is, like I said just now, this isn't a presentation about GearSet, and I'm not going to try and sell GearSet to you because that's not really what I'm about. I'm more about best practices and spreading a little bit of knowledge and helping you make your own decisions about what you should do with your Salesforce delivery process. But a bit of background about GearSet. GearSet are one of the leading platforms for DevOps in Salesforce. So you may have heard of a couple of the others. Capado is a big one, AutoRabbit and other vendors, and we're about to talk about DevOps Center in just a second. But GearSet have been in the Salesforce ecosystem officially for 6 years. So we launched at Dreamforce back in 2017. And for that amount of time, and since we have been around, what we've been doing is trying to help Salesforce teams get off of change sets and move towards more agile and more familiar software delivery methods that are more in tune with traditional software development. Salesforce lags a little bit behind in that. So that's what we, our CEOs and co-founders, are software developers by trade. So what we've been trying to do for that time is bring those software development best practices to the Salesforce platform in a way that both configurators and developers can also harmoniously work in. So if you want to find out more about GearSet and what we do and the solutions that we offer, from the full DevOps solutions and backup solutions, head over to gearset.com. That's a little bit about who I work for and kind of where we started. In terms of a little bit of an agenda, so what I'm going to be talking about over the next kind of 20 minutes or so is, by the end of the session, we should understand a little bit more about why DevOps has risen to more prevalence recently. It's a pretty popular topic at the moment, so we're going to cover that and hopefully understand what it is, why it's important, what's involved, and what success looks like in this space. To give you a little bit of a flavor for that, DevOps is still a relatively new concept, and a lot of folks and a lot of teams, unless you're working for particularly large enterprises that may be more ahead of the curve and looking at topics like this, you maybe still be a little bit not left behind just yet, because it's still only really taken off, but this should hopefully help you understand a little bit more about why we're hearing more about it and kind of what success looks like. And also we're going to give you a little bit of resource so that you can learn where to find out more if this presentation appeals to you and learning more about it appeals to you. So we'll give you some info at the end there where you can learn a little bit more about DevOps. So that being said, like why are we learning more about DevOps? So those of you at the start of the call here that joined us at the beginning, TDX has just happened, and one of the major talking points at TDX this year, and off the back of DevOps Center, which was released by Salesforce going into GA back around Christmas time, DevOps is a massive buzzword in the Salesforce ecosystem at the moment. So that icon in the middle of my screen right there, that little cog with the arrows around it in the circle, is the DevOps Center logo. So for a long time, Salesforce administrators and developers and whoever else is configuring on the platform has relied on a set of tooling in Salesforce that has not particularly been the easiest to work with. So there's probably people in this room, if you've been working with Salesforce for a while, you've probably been victimized by a change set, is the reality of the thing. I know I have been, and that is the reality for a lot of us. And a lot of us spend our time wrestling with the actual deployments. We do what we're supposed to do. We build things in sandboxes and they all work and they're brilliant. And then we go, oh no, we got to get those changes from that sandbox into production and actually make it work for end users. And that process typically has been quite cumbersome, which is why we've seen Salesforce put a massive amount of investment into DevOps Center and the things that surround that. So DevOps has been a massive talking point for a long time. There's been a lot of gripe and a lot of complaints about Salesforce's native tools up until that point, especially because of the clicks not code thing. So your everyday admin and configurator isn't familiar with using a CLI day to day. So, and that's what DevOps Center, when they were releasing it and building it, was hoping to combat. As a result of that as well, you've got vendors like GearSet and Capado and things like that that have been in the ecosystem for 6 or so years now, trying to bridge that gap and solve that problem already, whilst also integrate with the developers. So you may well have heard of us, or you may well have heard of Capado or the other big names of this ecosystem, as well as some of the other things around there. So Salesforce even has its own architect credential. This figure is a little bit outdated. So development lifecycle and deployment architect is the name of the certification now, not designer. So Salesforce even has dedicated credentials to this stuff, because it is a difficult thing to solve on the platform. And there's a lot of us talking about it and figuring out the best way to do that. So that's a little bit about why we've heard about these problems. So either we've experienced the pain of doing deployments or wrestling with change sets before, or we've started to get a little bit more in tune with what best practices are from other software delivery cycles, or we may actually come from best practice software delivery cycles as well. I speak to a lot of folks that come from traditional software delivery backgrounds that are used to operating in this way. So there is that crossover, and I think that's amazing for the Salesforce ecosystem that we're seeing those folks come in to join us. So that's a little bit about the background about why we're hearing more about this subject and what it is that we're actually trying to solve. So what it is and what it isn't. So when we talk about DevOps, a lot of folks in this space think DevOps is just for developers. They think that I am an admin, I'm a configurator, then this stuff doesn't apply to me, basically. And that's just not the case. The other things that people think about is DevOps is a set of tools. So one of the most common reactions that I get when I speak to somebody that hasn't got too much experience with DevOps before is, I don't understand source control, or I don't understand continuous integration and deployment and all that stuff. And that is not what DevOps wholly is about. It's not just about the tooling. It's not just about technology. So what DevOps actually is a combination of the best practices of software development and IT operations, and combining those things to make sure that we have a holistic process that is allowing the Salesforce team, in this instance, to deliver to end users features and functionality that is going to actually accelerate and transform business. So we're all in the Salesforce ecosystem. We are all sold to about the wonders of the platform and the amazing things it can do, and it can do amazing things. But what often hinders us getting there is the delivery and being able to deliver that. And what DevOps aims to do is make that process a lot smoother, and gives us a chance to focus on the actual building of the features and the functionality. You know, like flow is all the rage right now. You know, we want to focus on flow. We want to build the best flows that we can, but a lot of the time we don't have the time to do that because we're wrestling with the boring stuff, quote unquote, like doing deployments with change sets that sink a lot of time. So it's not just for developers. It's not just for people who can code and use a CLI and are familiar with these kind of things. So we need to remove that kind of stigma, I guess, around DevOps as a topic. It's not just for the technically minded, it's for the business users, and it's about focusing on that process that allows our team to work harmoniously together, which is ultimately what we want in this space. In any team that we work in, whether you're a software delivery team or, you know, a retail team or whatever it might be, you all want to be working together harmoniously, and DevOps aims to do that for us as a software delivery team and a technical team on the Salesforce platform. What that doesn't say, and what I haven't spoken about it, is why we actually want to do DevOps. Like, why should we put time and investment into learning more about it and following more about the best practices? Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with this guy. So this guy is Pharrell Williams. And if you have children, then you probably do know who this guy is, because this guy made a song a couple of years ago that was accompanied by some little yellow people and a guy called Gru, and had a really catchy song called Happy. And DevOps, without me sounding all wishy-washy and philanthropic about the whole system, DevOps will make you happy. And ultimately, that is what we're trying to do. So the end goal of a great DevOps process, or implementing DevOps for your team, means that the team and everybody involved in the process and the software delivery lifecycle for Salesforce is going to be more happy about doing it. And what I mean by that is, because the traditional pains of delivering new features and functionality on the Salesforce platform has typically made people miserable. People don't like wrestling with change sets. People don't like staying up until 2 a.m. to do a delivery. You speak to somebody that's a consultant at one of the big 4 firms or one of the bigger system integrators in this space, you know, they've done deployments at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You know, that is ultimately the crux of what's going on. And for the most part, whether those people would like to admit it or not, those things can actually be avoided. And a good DevOps process is actually going to help us do that. So what DevOps is all about when it comes down to it is improving the livelihood of you and of your team and everybody that is surrounding you. It's about improving the lives of your end users. You know, DevOps allows you to deliver features and functionality to your end users quicker. You know, I'm sure loads of us have been in a situation where a user is just like, oh, this thing doesn't work, or, you know, it'd be really good if Salesforce did X, Y, Z, and you're like, we can do that for you, I just can't get it to you fast enough, right? So let's take some of that strain and take some of that pressure off of you by having a process that allows you to do that for those people faster. So yes, while it sounds wishy-washy, what we're ultimately looking for is a bit of happiness and a little bit of utopia. And ultimately satisfaction from the rest of the business, which is going to trickle down to you as well. So whilst Pharrell Williams and his song "Happy" might seem a bit pie in the sky at this point, that is ultimately what we're getting to. DevOps can and will make you happy. I've got plenty of experience speaking to teams where they've implemented a better process and they are far better for it and far happier for it. And there's some amazing case studies out there if you go and look for them. So that's a little bit about why you should do it and why we're hearing a lot more about it. So what is actually involved in a good DevOps process is what we're going to look at next. So this is a diagram of what traditional development on the software platform looked like versus what DevOps looked like. So I mentioned just now that DevOps is a combination of software development and IT operations best practices and combining those things. So on the left-hand side here, what we typically tend to see in most organizations, unless you are a single person admin and responsible for an entire Salesforce organization yourself, what we tend to see a lot is if you can see my arrow here, I'm not sure if you can, we see a lot of teams working in either a shared sandbox or individual sandboxes of their own, building new features and then throwing that over to an ops team once they've given them the features and the components that they've built and configuration that they built over to an operations team to then deploy into production. So the main thing that you can see compared to the diagram on the right here is that there are two main silos between dev and ops. So the developers build the things, operations deploy the things. And the first thing that we have here is an immediate silo and a breakdown in communication. So what DevOps aims to solve, if we look at the diagram on the right-hand side and focus there, is each person is responsible for their own changes and their own configuration and the own tweaks that they are making. They're putting that into a source control repository, which is Git, that is outlined here. And each person is responsible for each of those features, and that's what each of those lines represent. And that main line that runs through the middle, right to that package and the automation platform that is then deployed out to integration and production, is the development flow that we follow. So what you can see here is with the DevOps model of operating, what we have is a way of working that gives each developer, admin, person responsible for the changes their own responsibility for those changes right through the whole pipeline. And operations still exists, but what the operations people are responsible for is the technology platforms that is going to allow you to deliver it. So that's what DevOps is all about. It's about bringing cohesion and more defined responsibility for specific things and making sure that ownership of the process is actually held by everybody. So everybody plays a part in how features get delivered from initial development and creation right through that testing cycle. So DevOps is bringing together traditionally separated duties that people have and spreading that knowledge throughout the team and training people to allow responsibility to be held for those things that are sharing that common business goal and that common utopia that we're all looking for. So that's what we're looking at when, in real terms, what DevOps actually looks like from a technical standpoint. Oh, so there is two sides to every story, though. So DevOps is not just a technical challenge. So just now I spoke about, and what a lot of folks think DevOps is a set of tools or a set of technologies that allow us to do things. Like if you're an admin, for example, you're probably thinking, I can't do DevOps. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to use Salesforce DX. I don't know how to use CLI. And whilst that is one method of delivering on the Salesforce platform, that is not necessarily the whole story. You know, that's why tools like GearSet exist, for example, is to bridge that gap and bring people and close that technical knowledge when it comes to DevOps, make that gap a little bit smaller. But that technical side of things and that process side of things, it is only half of the story. So you have both the technical side, but you also have cultural changes that are needed to transform how we do things. So the first time I ever did this presentation was to a Salesforce military group, which is why I use this particular image, and I think the analogy works quite well. So in the background there, we have a fighter jet, one of the most technically advanced machines in the world, right? So no matter how good your technology is that you've got, no matter how good Salesforce is, no matter how good the DevOps platform or technology you're using to deliver Salesforce is, it cannot be used and it cannot be utilized effectively without the person driving it or people driving it, which is why we have the pilot in the foreground there. So we have a pilot that has a explicitly huge understanding of how this piece of technology works. But it's not just how that piece of technology works, it's also this person will be in briefings, it'll be in training, this person will be working as part of a team to deliver whatever the mission it is that they're going to. And it's the same thing with DevOps. So a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force doesn't fly up into the air and just fly around for a bit and come back down. They have a very specific set of protocol and processes that allow them to be successful, and a very specific training regime that allows them to be successful in the event that they need to be called to action. And whilst the analogy may be a little bit extreme, that's the same thing with the DevOps process. It is the people that are going to make them successful. These people are bought in to a specific process and a specific way of working, and they understand the process that is going to allow them to be successful, and they're supported by the best tools and the best technology to get the job done. And that is an analogy when I was thinking about this that really kind of resonated with what DevOps is, and also resonated with that group. And I still think that stands true, which is why I still use it. So it's all about the people, it's about the process, and it's about the technology, and having the best of all of those things and combining all of those things to make sure that we can do it properly. So when we think about the culture, is the main challenges when we think about DevOps is you might be thinking, oh, this is all well and good, Jack, but we always do things a certain way or always have done things a certain way, and it's really difficult to change. And that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to solving issues on the platform. We've always done things this way. That is an absolutely killer phrase for anybody in this space or any Salesforce team. We've always done things this way. This will hold you back, and this will ultimately hinder what progress that you could potentially be making, and the happiness that me and Pharrell were talking about earlier. This is something that you can seek to change. If you can get past that, this is the way that we've always done it. So when you are talking to stakeholders in this space, there is often a "this ain't broke, let's not fix it" kind of thing. So whilst change sets work, and you can somewhat reliably deliver your changes to Salesforce and deliver features and implementations via change sets or these antiquated delivery methods via those things, because it works, there is some resistance to change, or can be resistance to change, and that will ultimately hold you back is the crux of it. So getting past that process inertia and being able to create a vision of what can happen and what can be done by adopting more modern practices or adopting tools and technology and processes that are going to allow you to adopt those things can be really beneficial, which is why it's important, if you are looking to adopt a DevOps platform or looking to change the way you do things, you look at things like case studies. So if you look at case studies for GearSet customers, for example, a lot of our customers report savings of 12 hours plus a week by moving to GearSet as a DevOps platform in terms of what they're able to do. And if you think about that kind of time saving across a whole team, like what can a team do with an extra 9 hours a day? Can they learn something different about flows? Can they learn more about CPQ? Can they learn more about a feature or functionality that is actually going to drive business growth and is actually going to drive return on investment of the Salesforce platform? Your executive leadership did not buy Salesforce for it to be a spreadsheet. They're buying Salesforce for it to be a platform for change and for it to be a platform that they can rely on for their business's growth. So that process inertia, and we've always done it this way, will kill you. And the other thing is communication. So the biggest thing about a DevOps process and a really tightly oiled DevOps process, well-oiled DevOps process, is communication. And this also involves a level of transparency that a lot of teams aren't familiar with. So what I mean by that is a good DevOps process integrates a bunch of systems, so Jira, for example, as well as a repository system, which I'm going to touch on in just a second, as well as some other things. Maybe you're using Slack to help you with these things. And that invites a level of transparency that often people aren't comfortable with because they've not been exposed to it. And what you as a team and what your leadership team need to foster is a culture by which it's okay to have continual feedback. It's okay to have your work open for lack of a better word, scrutiny, and to say that that's okay, because what this is all about is about making each other better and ultimately delivering features for the business that are more fit for purpose and are going to be fit for purpose and match the user criteria. You know, we don't just build, you know, you speak to anybody about best practices with admin, right? You want to dig into the user requirements of why, or if there's any business analysts on the call, you know, you're going to dig into why. You know, and that's what communication is all about. Let's open those kind of communication lines and make sure that we have a good level of transparency into what's happening in the process. So those are the two things when it comes down to culture and a DevOps culture that you want to be thinking about when it comes to continual improvement. And then the other thing is the technical. So yes, whilst DevOps is largely about those cultural challenges and overcoming those cultural challenges, you have the technology side of things. So when we're looking at technology and the changes that we need to make internally to be successful, these are often the things that we're looking at. So automated unit testing. So automated unit testing, fairly easy to set up if you have a platform to do it with. This just helps us keep on top of any changes that we might be making and making sure that, especially if we're working with external consultants, or if we are working with a developer team, or if we're responsible for an org over any length of time, when Salesforce release their updates 3 times a year, we want to make sure that any changes that are happening under our feet and our unit tests still stay relevant. So if we set up automated unit testing, then we're going to be attuned to that when we need it. Version control. This is the big version control is the big one. When people think about DevOps, they think we need a developer to do it, and only a developer can use version control. So I would challenge any of you that are admins or business analysts to go and actually go away and look at version control and actually look at some of the commands and things like that in the platform that will help you get acquainted with version control. You can do it. It's a lot more scary. It sounds a lot more scary than it actually is. And then you have platforms like GearSet that will help you interact with these systems a little bit better. So what version control does is that instead of having an org, so production in Salesforce is our source of truth. What a version control system does is allows us to take the version control system as the source of truth and allow us to develop features and functionality that are a source of truth before pushing it to production. What it also allows us to do is, if you have a team of multiple admins and developers, allows each of us to work separately in isolation on features and not step on each other's toes. There's nothing more frustrating than working in a sandbox or trying to deploy a change and things have changed under your feet without you knowing. And that's what version control gives you. It gives you separation of duties, and it gives you a full change history of any change that's ever been made in Salesforce, and then gives you some versatility in terms of reliability and rollback if you ever needed to, or what have you. You know, there's plenty of occasions where I've spoken to admins, developers, etc., where they've done a production deployment, and then 2 days later, you know, when everybody comes back into work after deploying first thing in the morning on a Saturday morning, people come into work on Monday and say, hey, this thing is broken. You know, version control gives us some security that we can roll back to a previous working version of our production environment with version control. But mostly it's about a separation of duties and having that full change history so we know what's going on and increasing that transparency of what's going on in our environment. DevOps is about code maintainability as well. So if any of you are familiar, you might have heard of things like PMD, code analysis. to make sure that whatever is being built is maintainable and will not break our system. So these are important steps and important parts of the DevOps process that aren't particularly difficult to bake in, but we can bake in with a few simple steps. CI/CD is another big one that often gets misattributed to what DevOps is. So CI stands for continuous integration, CD stands for continuous delivery. And what this is mainly about helping the changes that we are making be pushed to upper environments to make sure that the things that we are changing and the things that we are making are being pushed to environments where they're continuously able to be integrated with existing functionality and features and tested, so that then they can be pushed to a production environment in a seamless and streamlined manner, which is the continuous delivery part. And this is kind of the thing that most people think DevOps is all about automation. You know, there's a lot of big talk about automation at the moment, flows and automate everything, you know, and that's what a lot of people think DevOps is. But that isn't necessarily always the case. You know, that utopia of continuous delivery is ultimately where we want to get to if you're adopting a tool like GearSet or looking at these processes. But what this is all about is removing the manual steps that you might have and those repeated steps. You know, people don't like cloning change sets. They don't like rebuilding features in production. And that's what continuous integration and continuous delivery looks to solve. You then combine that with automated testing. So as part of the CI/CD process, you also have automated testing. Testing is hugely important to making sure that your Salesforce org doesn't break, you know, making sure that your APIs work correctly, your endpoints and your integrations work correctly, no matter what configuration you're changing. So integrating automated end-to-end testing is hugely important, whether you are using an automated CI/CD process or just using sandbox to sandbox manual process. You're going to want to have some level of automated testing to remove that people involvement. And then finally, you need to have disaster recovery. So this is something that a lot of folks often forget or often don't consider that is part of the DevOps process. So disaster recovery is all about staying resilient in the event of something going wrong, whether that be data loss, metadata loss, or corruption from broken integrations and things like that. So to be able to move fast and be able to deliver features and functionality to our end users faster, we're going to want to stay safe. We're going to want to have some level of protection that allows us to do that. So if something does break, we're able to roll back or we're able to restore in an effective manner. So backup and disaster recovery really underpins any fast-moving DevOps process. So those are the main technical components of what DevOps looks like. So how do you know if you're being successful? So successful vary depending on the organization that you work for, the size of the team that you work for. But ultimately, it's about making this wheel move as quickly as possible and as quickly as is relevant for your business. So how fast we build something, how fast can we deploy it and test it in integration environments, and then how fast can we release it. And the faster that this cycle can be, and the smoother that this cycle actually rotates, actually dictates your success. You know, this cycle might only happen once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. If it's more than less than once a month, then you might want to think about that. But the faster and the more seamlessly that this circle moves indicates the success that your organization and that your team is having when it comes to delivering features to your end users. So one of the biggest ways that you can measure this success, if you want to go and look at metrics for success, I know a lot of senior stakeholders like metrics, and what are we measuring to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing, is the DORA metrics. So those are Google's DevOps research and assessment metrics, and they are lead time. They are lead time for changes, so that's how long it takes for a feature to get from development out to production. Deployment frequency, how often that you deploy. Change failure rate, so how often you ship a bug or how often breaking things is identified that needs rectifying when they get to production, and the time to recovery, so how long if something breaks or something needs restored. how long that takes. So those are the 4 key metrics that Google, through the DevOps Research Assessment, indicate as those indicators for best performance. But ultimately, that is going to differ, and what success looks like to your team will be based on the size of your organization and the level of your dependency on Salesforce. So as long as this wheel is moving nice and smoothly, and as long as you are operating in a way that within confines of what is acceptable to your business and your organization, then that is fine. But usually the lower the number of each of those metrics, the better shape you're in. Something that can't be understated as well, and I know I've talked a lot about various different things that make up good practice, best practice DevOps. But I think that the thing that can't be understated is good DevOps is a journey. You shouldn't expect to be doing best practice everything all at once. That is unrealistic, and that is a way that you set yourself up to fail. So DevOps is, at its core, is all about continuous improvement. So you cannot be like waterfall delivery methods, especially when it comes to implementing something like DevOps, just doesn't follow that methodology. It doesn't follow that best practice that we're talking about. So continuous improvement, continuous reflection on where we are and where we want to be is going to make us more successful. So your DevOps journey will potentially look something like this. So you might do nothing right now. You might just use change sets or what have you. And that's where you're starting at the beginner. Then you might start to incorporate more technology. You might start having some metadata or some sort of version control process. As a novice, as a practitioner, you might have even more metadata in there. You might start to automate some level of testing. You might even start to play with certain configuration that gets deployed automatically. And then before moving to expert, you're going to start to use more tools and have everybody involved in the process, adding even more automation into that before moving on to luminary stages where everything is firing on all cylinders. Lots of things happen automatically. And the communication process that I was talking about earlier works effectively enough where the changes and things that happen automatically for those people that are responsible for those changes are always kept in the loop with as little human involvement as possible. And that's what automation is all about. It's about making our lives easier so we can focus on those things. But DevOps is going to be a journey. There are actually very few Salesforce teams that sit in that level 5 luminary category. So whilst everybody wants to be aspiring to that level of DevOps maturity, there are actually probably only about 5% of all Salesforce teams ever that are currently sitting at that kind of stage. And that is okay. That is absolutely okay. That's why companies like GearSet exist, is to help people on this journey. So I've spoken quite a lot over the last, so however many minutes, it might be more than 20 minutes that I indicated at the start of here that this presentation would be. But if you're looking to learn more, then head over to DevOps Launchpad. So if Jana is still on the call, I don't know, Jana, if you're still here. I know for sure that you have completed some of the DevOps Launchpad course, having been at the lounge that we had at TDX. If you head over to DevOpsLaunchpad.com, you can actually learn more about what a good DevOps process looks like, right from beginner introductory courses to specific courses about version control and the technical areas that I've just given a brief introduction to there. So DevOps Launchpad is a great place for you to go and learn more about both the technical and cultural challenges that come with DevOps. Jenny, if you want to support DevOps Launchpad here quickly, then I would be gratefully then I would be very grateful for that. What do you think?
Yeah, both my husband and I did it. He struggled a bit more than I did, but I really didn't know what to expect, and I actually got it done in 2 hours. The Launchpad. What is the first one? Not the leadership. What is the other one called, Jack?
DevOps Fundamentals.
The fundamentals, yeah. So I did that one and did it in 2 hours, and it was super informative, and I learned a lot, and I would say anybody can do it.
Cool. Thank you, Jana. So yeah, DevOpsLaunchpad.com, if you're looking to learn more, is absolutely where I recommend that you go. Or if you have any questions around DevOps processes or anything else, then you can always contact myself or the team at GearSet. My email address is jackim@gearset.com, or you will often find me lurking on Twitter or LinkedIn, so you can find me there too. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of what DevOps is and why it exists in this ecosystem. So thank you very much for listening. I am here. I'm ready and willing to listen and take questions if there are any.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack.
You're very welcome.
A lot of great information here. So links to the DevOps Launchpad is in the chat. You are welcome to post your question in the chat. We'll hang around for a few more minutes, or you can just unmute yourself and ask your question right here. So opening the floor to everybody.
Yeah, I'm going to sign up for DevOps Launchpad right after this, or already started. This is cool. Yeah. Yeah. I have been using GearSet, but I'm not sure if I'm using it well because I'm like hacking my way through it. Like I had some issues with like moving the lightning record pages and stuff like that, but that's probably user error. But yeah, it's really great.
Bhavna, have you? So I'm gonna do shout out for GearSet and GearSet support here. Have you used Intercom? So the little chat widget, the little chat bubble.
Yeah, I should. I should. I haven't.
You know, you need to. Yeah, I tell you. So this is. No, I told you I wasn't going to sell GearSet, but actually that's a lie. I'm going to sell GearSet a little bit here. So GearSet support is amazing. I actually don't know how those guys do it. Like those folks that man that chat bubble all day, every day, blow my mind.
Okay.
Open that chat bubble and open a chat support ticket with them. That's all real time chat. So if you're having issues with GearSet, then or anything that's happening, often it's not a GearSet issue. It's a Salesforce. Like this is a quirk of Salesforce thing, and they'll help you solve it. So please open one of those Intercom chat widgets, and please don't struggle if you are using GearSet, or if anybody decides to go and trial GearSet after this and after hearing this, use Intercom to talk to our support team because they're amazing. Like I don't know how they do it. So please do that, Bhavna.
I'll do that.
Question, okay. Jack. I don't know if you can see the Zoom chat, or do you want me to read it from Karen?
Do you recommend using deployment days or using agile? So Karen, that depends. It depends on the requirements you have of your business. So a lot of businesses will have deployment windows for certain reasons. Critical systems, banking, finance tends to be one of those. There is very often very few reasons why you cannot deploy in an agile-like environment, providing that the end users aren't interrupted, or you have a robust enough process by where if something does break, because things break, you can have the best DevOps process in the world and things will still break. If you have a process where you're confident enough that you can roll back quickly to a previous version of the system that works for your end users, there's no process by which you can't deploy in the middle of the day. So, for example, we use Salesforce internally here at GearSet, and our administrators and developers for our Salesforce environment deploy in the middle of the day without us realizing. So,
part of the issue that I have with DevOps I don't have an issue with DevOps, but in the way that we work at my company, because my company is a little different in that our Salesforce admin team is part of IT. So we work on more of like a ticket type situation versus project. We do have some projects obviously, but so, when someone's like, hey, I need this permission set added, and then someone else is like, hey, I need this profile changed. And then another ticket is like, can you add this person to these, 10 public groups? Like pre-DevOps, we would just do it. Like I would just go in, find that user and add them to that public group, or I would just go in and change their profile. But now with DevOps, and I understand why we need to use it, we like really need to use it, but it's like, I'm obviously not going to do that every single time, right? Like I'm not going to try and snapshot the information from my sandbox and then deploy it to our UAT environment and then deploy it to production when it's like, adding one person to a public group. So I'm just wondering like about the process. Is it better to have like, oh, we deploy at this certain time of day, or oh, we deploy only on Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever. And then you can group that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think user management is actually a separate issue, like entirely.
Okay.
When it comes to when it actually comes down to it, the things you're talking about are like more user management things than actual configuration changes and things that actually impact the system itself and how generally the Salesforce works for the organization. So yeah, I agree with you. If somebody's saying, can I be added to this thing, like as a user, then that's fine. Those things don't happen. Those things happen outside of a DevOps process and is handled by like a management process.
I feel like sometimes though we would have to do it, at least deploy it to our UAT, because we do have some users who go into our UAT to test stuff, and they would need to have the right permissions and things like that. Like,
Yeah. So providing the user itself, the user has X profile applied and X permission sets, right? Any changes to those permission sets and what those permission sets do, etc., should and can be pushed through a DevOps process and in source control and everywhere else that those profiles and permission sets live. It can. And for the most part, those things, if you're pushing them through an automated or agile methodology rather than having like a deployment window, is going to be fine. The bigger things, if you're talking about release windows for major changes to business process automation, so if you're deploying like new flows that follow new business logic and things like that, then yes, absolutely, you may well do that outside of business hours. A good DevOps process will allow you to validate those changes and allow you to schedule a deployment for a certain time or be able to quick deploy at a time that suits you, so you're not staying up till 2 a.m. to do those things. You can like pre-validate those kind of things, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. But yeah, there doesn't necessarily need to be deployment days. You find even in the most regulated industries, providing that you're following a specific change management tracking methodology and every change that you're making is accounted for, etc., then you're usually fine to follow whatever method suits you best.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think as a best practice, because if there's something broken in production and they can't function, then deploy right away. But otherwise, it's better to have, because I have the main issue is like, if I'm going to deploy something and if something breaks, then do I have a team to support it? So are the developers available to fix if something breaks? So I like Wednesday nights because then I have 2 more days to fix it. Don't ever do it Friday night because I call everybody over the weekend.
Yeah, so, we never do Friday.
Yeah, so that way, and I like to group them. So if something breaks, then we know this was what the change was and what can be rolled back or and who, so it makes, if something breaks, because you can test all you want, but sometimes there's something that only happened in production.
Right.
Yeah.
Great point.
So we have something to it for this topic, and I don't know, maybe it will be helpful to some of you. Karen kind of adds to what Bhavna and Jack said, that so when I worked in a large organization, we had 9 Salesforce DevOps teams, so different business units, and they had their own Salesforce teams, but we were all in the same org. So we actually had a weekly Wednesday meeting where project manager or product owner, whatever you want to call it, and some key developers or BAs were present, and all of the deployments that was scheduled, like a bigger deployments, the bigger things were coordinated, and any impact was discussed. And that was cool DevOps tools, so we can see all the impact now. So we kind of had to figure it out on our own. Now with Gearset and other tools of such, you can run some analysis and you see what other things are impacted. So that conversation can go easier. Then we did most of the deployments on Thursday, similarly what we did on Thursday, and then kind of try to catch other things, but also did any impact analysis as much as possible. we were very strict on making sure that everything goes through UAT, so from the dev sandbox to UAT, and then to production, even though sometimes admins or developers would like to push things quickly through. Fully understand, especially if users are blocked from getting something done, it is a lot of pressure, but really making sure that everyone follows this process is super important in the bigger teams. And then, yeah, so also we had a channel of communication. Initially was chat and then moved to Slack, where there was a channel where any changes that were made that could potentially, even in a slight bit, impact others, like profile change or page layout change, they were strict, you know, they were communicated and all impacted teams were tagged, so they aware and they keep an eye on that. So really just keeping that communication, over communicating was a key. Making sure that everyone is aware of everything that's happening. Yes, it's a little bit of overhead, but surprisingly with 9 teams, we rarely had any type of issue or overlap at all, just making sure that everyone follows the process. We do have quite a few more questions. So Jack, if that's okay, I'll keep moving questions forward. So Della, hi Della, asked, are you still here, Della? Trying to see, yes, you are. Why is testing not after build in the DevOps cycle, but after deploy?
Yeah, so in the diagram that I showed you, quite typically a lot of testing happens after that initial deployment to, like Alicia was saying, about into a UAT environment. That's where, or a pre-UAT environment, staging or integration, etc. So that's why testing is where it is in that diagram that I showed you. The best practice DevOps, and what you really want to be doing, is making sure that you shift left with your testing as far as possible. So most of the testing that you do does happen in dev environments or developer sandboxes, and that it is incumbent on that admin or that developer configurator, whoever it might be, that feature is bashed over the head as much as it can be in a developer environment to make sure that it works before then going to integration and then to UAT. There is obviously a case you can bash it over the head. You can make sure that it's got the unit tests that it needs if it's Apex or what have you at that earlier stage. But you might still then have it might unfortunately then still break an integration when it gets to integration testing at that stage, but the deployment to that stage has already happened, or it might break at UAT. It's not fit for purpose, etc. at that stage. So that's why it is where it is. But the further left that you shift the testing for any of these things, or the further left you shift any of these parts of the processes, the better off you are. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have 2 questions from Rachel. Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask questions directly if that's easier, just making sure we have them recorded as well.
Yeah, Rachel, so the first question you got is, does GearSet have any limitations in terms of what you can push between environments? So GearSet is an API-based tool, so the only limitations that GearSet has are those around the metadata and tooling API. So if something is unsupported by the Salesforce metadata or API, then GearSet can't push it. The same will be for any tool that you use, be it Workbench, another DevOps platform, etc. We all have the same limitations if we're using APIs. So
cool, thank you.
You're welcome. And you find that with GearSet, the customers don't tend to refresh their sandbox as much because they can just use version control. Yeah, that is a really interesting question. So we have found that people do actually refresh sandboxes less, and that is because they can backsync metadata from production to multiple sandboxes backwards. If they want to, if they're using multiple environments, and those environments sometimes get out of sync. So GearSet is a great tool for comparing environments and deploying metadata between them, whether that's upstream or downstream. But what you can also do with GearSet is it has data deployment capabilities as well. So a sandbox refresh might not always be necessary if you're looking to refresh a sandbox for data purposes. That becomes slightly unnecessary. You also find with a good DevOps process, depending on your sandbox strategy, that your environments actually drift less as well anyway. So it might not be necessary for your sandbox to be refreshed. So sandbox management is something that becomes a little bit easier the better your DevOps process is on the whole. But that's not to say that people shouldn't refresh their sandboxes if that kind of drift happens. Just needs a little bit of maintenance if you decide to do that.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great question, everybody. Thank you so much for participation. I don't see any other questions. We will be wrapping up the call. I did post Jack's LinkedIn earlier in the chat. Feel free to scroll up, but in the follow-up notes, you will see that. And also in the recorded presentation, you'll see his information as well. In the end, thank you all so much for joining today. We hope that it was valuable for you and educational. And we will continue the conversations in LinkedIn and Twitter about the DevOps. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you, Jack, for your time.
Thank you.
I know it's so late for you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Right, bye.
Take care.